Amina's life had been planned from the moment she was born. The daughter of one of Africa's wealthiest billionaires, she was constantly surrounded by luxury and opulence. Every moment of her life seemed to be scripted: attend the finest schools, wear the most expensive brands, and attend extravagant events. Yet, none of it brought her joy. Her heart felt heavy under the weight of expectations, and her soul longed for something more. The grand parties and lavish gatherings only intensified the feeling of emptiness that had begun to consume her. It wasn't that she wasn't grateful for the privilege she had, it was that she had been born into it without any say in the matter. From an early age, her father had built an empire of unimaginable wealth, one that stretched across industries and borders. As his heir, Amina was expected to eventually take over the reins, managing businesses and attending high-profile meetings. But all of this felt hollow to her. One night, at a glamorous gala in Paris, she found herself surrounded by world leaders and top business executives. The music played in the background, the glasses clinked, and people exchanged pleasantries, but Amina felt like a stranger in her own skin. She had been to dozens of such parties, but this one felt different. The laughter sounded forced, the conversations too rehearsed, and the smiles too shallow. Her father had been in his element, charming guests and talking about new ventures. He was always the center of attention, his magnetic personality drawing people toward him like moths to a flame. Amina, on the other hand, was content to stand on the edges, her eyes drifting toward the exit. She had been raised to blend in, to be poised, to never make a scene. But tonight, something inside her snapped. She excused herself from her father's side, slipping out into the cool Parisian night. The city, with its lights and energy, felt like the only place where she could breathe. Amina didn't know where she was going, but she needed to escape. The suffocating walls of wealth, status, and expectation closed in on her, and she just needed a moment of silence away from the noise of the world she was trapped in. Her thoughts were a whirlwind as she walked along the Seine. She was supposed to be grateful for everything she had, wasn't she? But the truth was, she felt more like a puppet than a person. Everyone had an idea of who she should be, her father, the media, even the people who adored her. But no one ever asked Amina what she wanted. No one cared about the quiet girl behind the perfect image. That night, she made a decision that would change everything. She would leave. She would escape from the suffocating life of luxury, at least for a little while. She needed to find out who she really was, not the version that everyone else wanted her to be. It wasn't about running away forever, it was about running towards something more real. Amina knew she couldn't make a dramatic exit, not yet. Her father's company was too big, too important, and she was expected to be there at the helm someday. But for now, she could vanish for a while, live as a regular person, if only for a short time. The next morning, Amina made her plans. She would leave without telling anyone, without making a fuss. She could get lost in the world without being tracked by her name or her wealth. She booked a flight to a small village in Africa, far from the glamour and attention of the cities she had grown up in. She would blend in, live simply, and find out if there was a life beyond the gilded cage she had been born into. Amina arrived in the village under the cover of night, her identity concealed behind a simple scarf and oversized sunglasses. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in her life, she felt free, but also exposed. She had no idea what to expect. She had always lived in luxury, surrounded by servants and security. Now, she was in a remote village with no one to rely on but herself. The village was nothing like the grand cities she was used to. It was small, nestled between rolling hills and wide, open plains. The air was thick with the scent of earth and wood, and the stars in the sky were brighter than anything she had seen in years. The sounds of the night were different here too, no honking cars, no chatter from parties or business calls. Just the distant rustling of leaves, the croak of frogs, and the occasional whistle of an owl. Amina checked into a modest guest house, the kind of place that didn't have the polished marble floors or the air-conditioned rooms she was accustomed to. The woman who ran the place, an older lady named Mama Amara, welcomed her warmly and gave her a small room with a bed covered in faded linens. It wasn't much, but it was perfect for what Amina had in mind. For the first time in her life, she wasn't worried about the next big meeting or social event. She was just existing. The next morning, Amina went for a walk around the village. The people here were friendly, their smiles genuine, but there was no sense of pretense. They didn't recognize her as the daughter of a billionaire, and that was exactly what she wanted. She had told Mama Amara that she was simply a traveler passing through, and for now, that was all anyone needed to know. The village was bustling with life. Women carried baskets of fresh produce on their heads, chatting and laughing with each other. Men worked on small farms, tending to crops and animals, while children ran through the streets, their laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. It was simple, yet there was a beauty to it that Amina had never experienced before. The people here worked hard, but they lived with a sense of purpose and community that she had never known. As Amina wandered through the village, she met a man named Toba, a local farmer who worked with the land. He was a few years older than her, with a quiet, kind demeanor. He had a rugged charm, and there was something about him that drew Amina in. He didn't see her as a billionaire's daughter. He saw her simply as a young woman, just like any other, with her own dreams and desires. Toba didn't ask her about her past or where she came from. Instead, he invited her to visit his farm the next day to see how he worked with the land. There was something deeply fulfilling in his words, a sense of connection to the earth that Amina had never known. She had grown up surrounded by skyscrapers and luxury cars, but here, everything was grounded in nature, in the rhythm of the seasons and the land's ability to provide. The following day, Amina found herself on Toba's farm. It was modest, with rows of crops and a small patch of animals grazing nearby. Toba worked alongside his family, planting, harvesting, and taking care of the land. The work was hard, but it was honest. There was no pressure to succeed beyond the needs of the land, and the rewards were tangible: fresh food, a sense of accomplishment, and the comfort of knowing that your efforts made a difference. Amina spent the day learning how to plant vegetables, how to feed the animals, and how to care for the crops. She wasn't used to this kind of labor, but she found herself enjoying it more than she had expected. The earth beneath her hands felt grounding, and the simple act of working with nature gave her a sense of purpose that she had never experienced in her life of privilege. As the sun set over the farm, Amina sat on a small bench, watching the colors of the sky change as Toba worked nearby. The world seemed quieter here, the pace slower. It was a stark contrast to the whirlwind of high society, where everything was fast, loud, and constantly changing. Here, time seemed to move at its own pace, and Amina felt at peace. She couldn't help but think about her life back in the city. Would her family be worried about her? Would her father even notice she was gone? She didn't know. All she knew was that, for the first time in her life, she was making choices for herself. She wasn't hiding behind the shield of her family's name or their wealth. Here, she was just Amina, the girl who wanted something different, something real. As the days passed, Amina found herself drawn more and more to Toba's way of life. He had a quiet wisdom about him, a calmness that was in stark contrast to her frantic, image-conscious upbringing. They spent more time together, talking about life, about dreams, and about the future. Toba never treated her like a rich girl. He treated her like a person, and that made all the difference. For the first time in years, Amina felt like she could breathe. There were no expectations, no roles to play. She could simply be herself. But deep down, Amina knew that this life couldn't last forever. She was still the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in Africa, and her family would eventually come looking for her. Her decision to escape wasn't permanent, but for now, it was the freedom she had been craving for so long. She couldn't stay in the village forever, but maybe, just maybe, the lessons she was learning here could change her life forever. As the days turned into weeks, Amina found herself more deeply entwined in the rhythm of village life. Every morning, she would wake up early, breathe in the fresh air, and step outside to greet the sun. She would help Toba on his farm, learning the intricacies of the soil, how to tell when crops were ready to be harvested, and how to care for the animals. The work was exhausting, but it was fulfilling in a way she had never known. The simplicity of it all was refreshing, but it wasn't without its challenges. Amina missed her family, her mother's lavish dinners, and the comfort of a life where she never had to lift a finger. But the more time she spent in the village, the more she realized that those things hadn't brought her happiness. It was the connection to the land, the people, and the honesty of hard work that brought her peace. Toba had become more than just a friend. He had become a companion, someone she could talk to without pretense. His life was simple, and yet, it held a wisdom that she longed to understand. He never judged her, never questioned her motives for being in the village. He simply welcomed her into his world, showing her the beauty of a life that wasn't centered around wealth or status. One evening, as they sat under the wide expanse of the star-filled sky, Toba shared something with Amina that made her heart ache. He told her about his dreams for the future, how he hoped to expand his farm, build a school for the village children, and create a sustainable future for the people who relied on the land. His passion for his community was evident, and it made Amina question everything she had known about success. She had been raised to believe that success was measured by money, power, and influence. But Toba's vision was different. For him, success meant improving the lives of others, leaving a legacy that would help the village thrive for generations to come. Amina couldn't help but admire him. He had a sense of purpose that she had never felt. She had always been surrounded by luxury, but in the quiet moments spent with Toba, she realized that her life had been lacking something vital, meaning. What good was wealth if it didn't bring fulfillment? What good was fame if it didn't bring genuine connections? As the weeks turned into months, Amina began to see the village through a different lens. She started to appreciate the small things, the sound of laughter in the distance, the smell of fresh bread baking in the morning, the warmth of the sun on her skin. These were the things that made life beautiful, and they were the things that money couldn't buy. But even in this idyllic life, there were moments of doubt. Amina still struggled with the idea of her family finding out about her escape. Her father, especially, would not understand. He would not approve of her abandoning the life he had worked so hard to build for her. He would see it as a betrayal, an act of rebellion that could tarnish the family's name. Amina had never been one to shy away from difficult conversations, but this was different. This was not just about a disagreement between father and daughter, it was about two completely different worlds colliding. Could she truly leave behind everything she had known for a life that would never be the same? One day, as she walked back from the market with Toba, her phone rang. The sound startled her, and for a moment, she forgot what it was like to be connected to the outside world. She took the phone from her bag and saw her father's name flashing on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. It had been months since she last heard from him. What could he want now? With a sigh, she answered the call. Amina, her father's voice boomed from the other end. Where have you been? Your mother and I have been worried sick. Why haven't you called? Why haven't you come home? Amina froze. The weight of his words hit her like a ton of bricks. She had been so caught up in her new life that she had neglected the people who cared about her. But how could she explain the truth? How could she tell him that she had left everything behind because she was tired of the empty life he had given her? I needed some time away, father, Amina said, her voice shaky. I needed to figure things out for myself. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. She could hear her father's breathing, his disbelief and frustration building. You think you can just run away from your responsibilities, he finally said, his voice cold. You're not some common girl, Amina. You have a duty to this family, to the legacy we've built. You can't just walk away from all of it. Do you understand? Amina felt the sting of his words, but she didn't back down. She had made her choice, and now, she had to live with it. I'm not running away, father, she said firmly. I'm choosing something different. I'm choosing a life where I don't have to be defined by my wealth or my name. I want to live for something real. There was another long pause. Finally, her father spoke, his voice quieter now, tinged with disappointment. I don't know what you think you're doing, but I won't support this. If you continue down this path, you will be on your own. Amina's heart sank, but she held her ground. She had never been more sure of anything in her life. I understand, she said softly before ending the call. Toba, who had been walking beside her, noticed the sadness in her eyes. He didn't ask her what the call was about, but he offered a gentle smile, his presence comforting. You know, sometimes the hardest part isn't making the decision, he said quietly. It's accepting the consequences that come with it. Amina nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She had made her decision, and she would face whatever came with it. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. She was no longer living in the shadow of her family's expectations. She was living for herself. And in that moment, Amina realized that no matter what happened next, she would never look back. Days passed, and Amina found herself at a crossroads. The conversation with her father still echoed in her mind, and she knew that the distance between her old life and the new one was growing with each passing day. It wasn't just the call that made her feel uncertain, it was the growing realization that her decision wasn't just about her. It was about everything she had ever known, the expectations, the responsibilities, and the legacy she was meant to carry forward. But even in this confusion, there was one thing she was sure of: she couldn't go back. The life she had been living was no longer enough. She needed to discover her own purpose, to find fulfillment in a way that was entirely her own. That meant continuing down the path she had chosen, even if it meant facing obstacles that she hadn't anticipated. Toba, ever the calm and grounded presence in her life, never wavered in his support. He wasn't one to speak much about his own past, but every once in a while, Amina would catch a glimpse of the quiet strength he possessed. He was the kind of person who faced challenges head-on without complaint, who saw hardship as a part of life rather than something to be avoided. One morning, as they sat by the fire roasting maize, Amina asked him something that had been on her mind for a while. Toba, why didn't you ever leave the village? She asked. You could have had a better life. You could have gone to the city, made something of yourself. Toba looked at her for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. He took a slow sip of the drink in his hand before speaking. Because I already have everything I need right here, he said, his voice steady. This village, these people, they are my family. I didn't need the city or the money. I needed to help them, to give something back. Amina sat back, absorbing his words. It was a perspective she had never fully understood before, but it resonated with her now in a way it hadn't in the past. Toba didn't chase wealth, fame, or power. He chased something more meaningful: purpose. In the weeks that followed, Amina became more involved in the community. She helped Toba with his plans to expand the farm, and they worked together on a project to create a small school for the village children. Slowly but surely, Amina began to realize that there was so much more to life than what she had been taught to believe. But as her bond with Toba grew stronger, so did the doubts that nagged at her. She couldn't escape the reality of her past. The glittering world of wealth and privilege still called to her, even from afar. And every now and then, she would find herself wondering if she had made a mistake by walking away from it all. One evening, as she and Toba were walking to the river to fetch water, they were approached by a group of villagers. They had heard about the new school Amina and Toba were building and wanted to offer their help. Some brought tools, others brought food, and a few brought their children to help with the labor. Amina watched as the villagers came together, their faces filled with pride and determination. It was a humbling sight. They weren't just building a school, they were building a future for their children, a future they could all be proud of. And for the first time, Amina felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. That night, as she lay in bed, Amina reflected on the journey she had undertaken. She had left behind a life of luxury to find something that money could never buy: purpose, love, and community. The city, with its endless distractions and empty promises, seemed so far away now. But her mind was still troubled by the weight of her decision. What would happen if her family came looking for her? Would they bring her back, force her to return to the life she had tried to escape? The thought made her chest tighten. She had already made her choice, but the fear of losing everything still lingered. The next day, her fears came to a head. She received another call from her father. This time, his voice was more insistent, more demanding. "Amina, this is getting out of hand," he said. "You can't just throw away everything we've built. You have responsibilities to this family, to your heritage. You need to come home." Amina's heart sank, but she didn't back down. She had expected this moment, and she knew what she had to do. "Father, I'm not coming back," she said, her voice firm. "I've made my decision. I'm not living a life for anyone but myself anymore. I'm building something here, something that means more than all the money in the world." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Amina feared that she had gone too far. But then her father spoke again, his voice softer this time. "I don't understand, Amina," he said. "But if this is what you want, then I can stop you. Just know that this decision will change everything. You will never be the same again." Amina nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I know," she said quietly. "But I have to do this." As the call ended, Amina felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. She knew she had made the right choice, but the weight of her decision was heavier than ever. Her father might have given up on her, but she couldn't give up on herself. She had found her purpose, and she would fight to hold on to it. The journey ahead would be difficult. There would be sacrifices and challenges, but Amina was no longer afraid. She had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed, and she was ready to face whatever came next. With Toba by her side and the village supporting her, Amina felt ready to embrace her new life, no matter where it would take her. The days that followed Amina's decision were marked by a sense of clarity. She felt the weight of her father's words lingering in the back of her mind, but every time doubt crept in, she reminded herself of why she had chosen this path. The life she had been living in the city, surrounded by wealth and luxury, had never felt like hers. She had always been playing a role that was expected of her. But now, as she walked along the dirt roads of the village, barefoot and free, she finally felt like herself. Toba remained her steady anchor, his calm presence offering her the comfort she needed to keep moving forward. Together, they worked tirelessly to build the school, and the village began to flourish under their combined efforts. Word of their work spread, and soon, other villages began to send their children to learn from the new school. Amina was teaching more than just academics, she was teaching them hope, resilience, and the importance of community. But as the school grew and the village became more connected, the reality of her past began to feel distant. Amina had left behind a world of opulence, a world where people valued status over substance, and had stepped into a world where hard work, kindness, and unity were the currency. It was a world that felt right, a world that Amina had never imagined could be hers. One evening, as she and Toba sat by the fire, she reflected on how much had changed since she first arrived in the village. She had come here with a heart full of uncertainty, but now, she was at peace. She had found not only purpose but also love, true love. The kind of love that didn't depend on wealth or appearances, but on mutual respect and understanding. Toba turned to her, his eyes warm with affection. "You've changed, Amina," he said quietly. "When you first arrived, I could see the weight of the world on your shoulders. But now, you found your place here. You found your purpose." Amina smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I found more than that, Toba. I found myself. And I found you." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers brushing gently over hers. "And I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice full of conviction. "We'll build this together. We'll create a future for these children, for this village. And we'll do it side by side." The next few months were a whirlwind of growth and change. The school continued to thrive, and Amina's influence within the village grew. She began to organize programs that helped women start their own businesses, and soon, the entire community was united in a shared vision of prosperity and equality. But even as she found fulfillment in her new life, there were moments when Amina couldn't help but think of her old world. The city, the luxury, the high-profile parties, all of it still called to her sometimes. It was hard not to feel a pang of longing when she saw glimpses of her father's life in the news or when she heard from old friends who were still living in that world. One day, as she sat with Toba under the shade of a tree, a letter arrived for her. She opened it carefully, her heart racing with anticipation. It was from her father. "Amina," the letter began. "I have seen the changes in you, and though I don't fully understand them, I can see that you have found something important. You've always had the potential for greatness, and now I see that greatness manifesting in ways I never imagined. I may not agree with all your decisions, but I respect them. You've made a life for yourself that matters, and I am proud of you." The words sent a wave of emotion through Amina. Her father had never been one to express his feelings openly, and for him to acknowledge her journey meant more than she could say. She folded the letter with care, a sense of closure washing over her. She had proven to herself, and to her family, that she was capable of charting her own course. That evening, as Amina and Toba watched the sunset together, a peaceful silence fell between them. The village was quiet, and the world seemed to stand still for a moment. Amina knew that this was where she belonged. She had left behind the life of privilege and expectation, but in doing so, she had found something far more valuable, true happiness. Toba squeezed her hand gently. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice full of tenderness. Amina nodded, her eyes reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. "I've never been happier." And with that, the last of her doubts faded away. She had come to the village seeking freedom, seeking herself, and in the process, she had found something far more profound: love, purpose, and a life that was entirely her own. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Amina knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would not always be easy, but with Toba by her side and the support of the village, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. The rich girl who had once sought escape had finally found her place in the world, not through wealth or status, but through the love and dedication she had given to those around her. She was no longer defined by her past but by the life she was building in the present, a life that was truly her own.